Good morning. I've had this image in mind ever since I had this talk. Ever since I had this talk in mind, so I'd like to give this image to you. We're all seated around a warm fire. It's at nighttime. We can see the stars and the night sky, and we're all thinking about a story that's important to us, that we've told or that we've been told. And that story is a flame above us and inside us. And the flames jump around from person to person, and they give us understanding and connection to our friends and unity. And then I see that circle expanding out to our community and then to the whole world. And we understand each other all the better.
Okay, and so I'm going to give a quick little introduction of how we're going to set this up after Zach shared that image that he's had. We're going to talk about this. We kind of named this storytelling. See, we one another clearly. That's a lyric from a song. And Zach's going to talk about storytelling, and I'm going to insert like quotes that he wanted to reference. And so I will be jumping in and inserting those quotes. And then I'm going to take a little section, and then it's going to jump back to Zach for the end. So we're just sharing our time here with you guys. Okay, Zach, so you're on.
I'm a storyteller from a long line of storytellers. So I've got to be really careful here, not to just start to tell a story, because any good story worth telling well takes more time than we have here, even with divine order. So I'm just going to talk about storytelling. From, from the earliest times, stories were told around a campfire. They were designed to be repeated over and over again to pass on culture and knowledge across the generations. They were told to teach, for entertainment, and for worship. At least that's how I see it. Because, well, it makes a good story, doesn't it? We know that in ancient times, religious leaders and teachers always told stories to further the path to enlightenment. And I believe that storytelling has always had a spiritual component. I believe that it can heal, connect us, and transform.
Okay, here's Zach's first quote. It comes from a book called Writing as a Sacred Path, or an article by Jill Jepson. She says that storytelling is a profoundly spiritual act in which the tellers bear witness to the experiences of being on the earth and act as the voice of the human soul.
So today, we want to show you some of the truly remarkable things that can happen when all of us bring our stories together. And we hope you enjoy it. Listen to tell it to teach it. The beginning of a story from Chile. A story, let it go, let it come. A beginning from West Africa. You have heard it said, one from Jesus of Nazareth, and more familiarly, once upon a time. These words are an invitation into story. They invite us to be transported. They prepare us to be changed by what we hear. When I first thought of this topic, Diane Ferlante, a captivating storyteller, came to mind. And the stories he told at Bill Clinton's first inauguration, his inauguration celebration. Here is how she began.
Okay, so now I am going to share a screen. We'll see how this works. Ooh. select the window I want to share. I'm going to share that one. Is anything sharing? No.
Okay.
Hmm.
Tell me when I should just skip that.
Well, again, sharing the screen. It said I can pick a tab. Well, let's see. You're not getting any shared screen?
Oh,
Wait
yeah,
a minute. I got
yeah.
it now. I got it now. Except those things are in the way. Toolbar. Okay. Okay, I think I got it. And we're just going
And here's how she began.
And here's how she began her story. Right. Here we go.
I'm so glad I'm here. I'm so glad I'm here. I'm so glad I'm here to share my story.
The truth is that
Oh,
Hollywood's elite actors
they're
can get
giving me
ripped while adding 12, 15, even 20 pounds of muscle in just a few weeks because they follow a long forgotten and suppressed by the fitness industry
Can we
secret that was used for generations of bodybuilders and athletes before steroids were even invented.
Sorry about that. I don't know how to keep it from showing a commercial. I had it all set up so good. Let's see.
So,
Sometimes these ads come up right in the middle of the videos, and you have to skip. You go to the lower right hand corner and just skip ad real quick, and it comes back to the video.
Okay, well, let's see. It didn't say skip ad, so let me see. There it is again.
all right.
But that was impressive.
We're all
Again,
it's not giving me a skip ad, but maybe because all those people's faces. There we go. Your faces were over it. All right, there we go.
A long, long time ago, the creator was traveling. Ha! And as he was traveling, his face was shining so brightly, you couldn't see his face. And as he was traveling, in his hands he carried a gourd, and in the gourd were many, many languages. And each group he met, he gave them a very special language. Everywhere he went, he gave them a very unique language. And when he arrived in Africa, the place where my ancestors come from, he stopped and he said, "Wow, this is beautiful. The trees, the animals, the people. I need go no further. I'll stay right here."
Wait, I haven't stopped sharing. There you go.
don't worry. You can find out what happens next. Hopefully, we've provided the length of the whole 5-minute story.
Mhm.
And fingers crossed, when you watch it again on YouTube, pay special attention to the faces of the children, totally transfixed by what she was saying, open and ready to receive her message. I will never forget that story. It came to life for me. Even as a young child, I knew that her message was timeless and universal. And I knew that the new president was in that room and that he would carry her message into his new presidency with him. And I knew that everyone who heard that story in the theater or on TV, the message would stay with them. And the meaning of the story would spread around that way. And I believed that because we had all now heard the same story, we were all now connected. We had all shared in a truth. Perhaps a bit naive, I grant you, but I still believe in the power of storytelling.
Okay, a second quote that Zach asked me to read is from Claire Patey at the Empathy Museum. Stories have a transformative power to allow us to see the world in a different way than we do if we just encounter it on our own. Stories are an entry point to understanding a different experience of the world.
Diane was my entry point. It was amazing to me how vividly I remember her story today. My parents always fed a hunger I have to learn about other cultures. Every time I learned a new legend, I wanted to know more. And every time I learned enough tales, I knew that both the stories and the cultures were and should be part of the great tapestry of all the world. Now, this is should be woven together. It should be woven together with other tales from other traditions. Now, this tapestry is composed of many different stories, not just the storyteller's narratives, but creation stories that we can all observe and find ourselves lost in. The saga we are surrounded by when we stare out at the endless ocean waves. The poetry we all experience when we find ourselves in a field of wildflowers. The epic of the infinite night sky. We are diminished if just one single thread is lost. You see, a tapestry starts with individual patterns and images, and as it's woven together, it moves toward a oneness. It's a visual metaphor for how I see the world and how I wish everyone saw the world.
Okay, here's another quote. This one's from Narit Brenner. If we want to see a more thriving world, if we want to see a more just world, if we want to see a more beautiful world, we must begin by telling the story of such a world. And from Unity's principles, the Christ is the expression of God within all people.
We are all the same, but we don't always know that. We see the other too often, not the oneness. And we don't share the stories of the other because they're not our stories. But they are. And they're stories that need to be heard. And they're stories of the spirit and of the light. And we must not hide that light.
And another quote, this one from Unity Principles. Our consciousness, the thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, perceptions, and feelings we hold shape the experiences of our life. And we must share the truth we know in order to grow.
We all affect the tapestry for good or ill. That's a quote from an old school book of mine. And I think that's where I got this idea of a tapestry that stuck with me for so long.
Okay, Zach has a second quote from Narit, I believe that's the way you say her name. If a story gives a storyteller power, then imagine how that power becomes magnified, amplified, and multiplied when a group gathers to sit in a circle to articulate collective experiences of our lives, weaving together the loose threads into a tapestry that presents a picture full of color, full of vibrancy and meaning.
Now, I think we all know of the power of a story to transcend
In trance.
and in trance. And remember when you sit in a darkened theater seat, you often find yourself outside of that seat. Time becomes irrelevant and our emotions are touched. And then we're transported back to that theater seat suddenly, unsure of how we even left. Well, the story has transported us. Any good yarn can do this. if we're open to it and willing to receive its message and be swept away. But what is happening? We are identifying with a character that we are connected with in the movie. We are feeling as the character feels. We are in their shoes. And if that character is a character from an unfamiliar culture or with a radical viewpoint, it could change our opinions.
I'm just going to go ahead and give this quote here by Hefferman. He's one of the researchers that we found. He said, by imagining ourselves in someone else's position, we can either affirm or challenge our beliefs and our assumptions.
I've told
Yeah.
I've told you that storytelling has a power, that it can connect, heal, and transform. And that truly marvelous things happen when we share our stories. An individual can heal from an emotional wound. A sheltered community can see the pain of its marginalized neighbors. A new concept can be understood. Attitudes can change. People can be united and action can be taken. So, if storytelling has all this power, we still have to be careful with it. Any power can be dangerous. In the words of the famous storyteller Stephen Sondheim, careful the tale you tell. That is the spell. Our world is hurting now. We are disconnected. Our community is factionalized. Do we address this through lecture, blogging, protest? Do these things have an effect? Certainly they do, but usually on the societal or macro level. How do we truly move the message of saving the environment, giving peace a chance, and loving one another? How do we turn the world around and make humankind truly see each other clearly? How do we affect the soul of an individual in the most meaningful way? Well, I'm a storyteller and I say story.
Okay. Thank you, Zachary.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go on with mine. Will be a little more technical, but I'm going to start with the Bible verse. Tell our children, let it be told to our grandchildren and their children too. And that's Joel, first chapter, verse 3. And so my part is more like your brain on storytelling. Zach spoke about what storytelling means to him, about how storytelling can connect people. And it can alter points of view. It can heal. It can change the world. It makes people care. It enables us to see each other. Isaac Dennison once said that even suffering is bearable if it is seen as part of a story. So we know it's effective. It's been used for millennia. We looked at storytelling, Zach and I, from all different religious traditions in preparing this. And we all know that spiritual components of like ancient Greek storytelling, animist tales, humorous Zen stories, and and Jesus, of course, is always used story. I looked at an article by Alexander Pierpoint. It was called Jesus, the Greatest Storyteller. And he's had some interesting things to say. He said Jesus tells stories not to communicate with people. He wants to challenge the status quo. He wants to shift paradigms. He wants to put people's preconceived notions up on their heads. He said, love your neighbor is a pretty foundational concept, and it's something we think is a pretty positive thing, easy to transmit. But Jesus would then engage with a story about things that everybody knows or knew. It sticks with them then. His stories are about empowering people. His stories are subversive. You know, think about the Good Samaritan. He also got 12 average lower class, uh, lower income guys, and plus many more, including women and children, which they didn't count for the, feeding of thousands. But they followed him. And then a 30-second pitch to love your enemy is not near as effective as the story of the Good Samaritan. It'll help you reconsider your attitude and your behavior. And Pure Point ends his long article, says a good story can now quite literally change the world. And I found another quote of Michael Margolis, and he said, these stories we tell literally make up our world. If you want to change the world, you need to change your stories. And another quote that I really liked, but I couldn't find the source anymore. It's the comprehension of a truth takes place when several threads suddenly intertwine to reveal the previously unknown story, usually a larger story, usually a story that is universal and timeless. And I used to use this quote in my classes. Daniel Pinchbeck says that in our Western civilization, we need stories, but we're only offered information. He claims it's almost our tragic fate as modern people to long for meaning, but just get an explanation. And stories will provide meaning, and information provides an explanation. It's estimated that 65% of human interaction is story, according to one researcher, Michael Hefferman. Even gossip is story, and great stories will empower. Disempowering stories, usually ones that we tell ourselves, they can trigger a cascade of stress hormones. And we create our own nightmares through these stories that we tell ourselves. But stories that are told to hurt or to incite are just plain dangerous. They lead to racism, consumerism, self-centered behavior, conflict that can last over generations. Another quote from the same source, to the human brain, imagined experiences are processed the same as real experiences. Through imagination, we're always able to tap into creativity that is the foundation of all innovation, self-discovery, and change. And as Zach just said, change for good or ill. So what does science say about your brain on storytelling? Well, storytelling always involves story listening, and both have been studied a whole lot by all different kinds of researchers. One's selling products, those promoting changes, those providing care. And I found so much. I'm going to try to just summarize it and hope it doesn't get boring, like I'm saying stories would change. If I could tell it as a story. I found a lot of interesting new organizations too. There's something called the Empathy Museum and something called the Human Library that I'd like to share if I have enough time at the end. So I'll start with, once upon a relatively recent time, the field of neuroscience took a little peek behind the curtain of stories. And I started looking at research with indigenous researchers. They focused on the narrative transport, as psychologists call it, and healing. And so I looked at an article by Sunwolf called Stories as Medicine. And in that article, I thought this was a good quote. In West Africa, when a person in the village becomes sick, the healer will ask, when was the last time that you sang? When was the last time that you danced? When was the last time that you shared a story? As part of his evaluation. Now, traditionally structured folk tales can also produce or induce kind of a soothing, healing like trance in the listener. And that's like holding the audience spellbound, right? Psychologists say that storytelling performances contain a lot of the exact same conditions necessary for inducing a healing trance. And there's a psychotherapist storyteller in the indigenous community that described healing trances as inner directed states of consciousness, such that although listeners' eyes may be on the storyteller, their consciousness is turned inward. Also, I want to look at how do stories increase empathy and reinforce some of our higher ideals like compassion and kindness. So I'll summarize some of these. For someone who's not very familiar with the workings of the brain, I think this stuff is pretty cool. And I now really believe that we were designed and created to be story listeners. And so, here it is, your brain on story. Story listening uses both sides of the brain. Information presented stimulates the left brain, and the structure of the story stimulates the right brain. So we're using a lot of brain. If we connect with a character or the individual telling a story, our brain releases oxytocin. Some people call that the bonding hormone. Some people call it the love hormone, but it's what mothers produce when they're breastfeeding. This creates empathy. Paul Zak, who's done a lot of research about brain stories, says the amount we release can actually predict whether people will give money to a cause associated with a story. And we identify with the character under stress. So we've got this one hormone, then cortisol is activated. And this leads to more immersion in the story and more responsiveness to the story. So we've got a story, if it captures your attention and it sweeps you away, right? And this flight of imagination, according to one psychologist, is where we enter the land of story. It's part of this narrative transport. And it's thanks to this cocktail of cortisol, because we have a heightened attention, and the oxytocin from our sense of a shared connection with the person. Like I'll turn off a movie. If I start to watch a movie and I don't get swept away, I usually turn it off because I'm not connected. And then once you feel emotion, they say the frontal and parietal cortices are then stimulated. And depending on the story, your palms can sweat, you'll blink faster, your heart can flutter and skip, your facial expressions shift. They noticed that people forgot about their surroundings, and even the muscles and the eyebrows began to react to different words that were being said. And there are mirror neutrons that are activated. And if we observe somebody performing an action or they're going through an emotion, and often unconsciously, we will mirror actions or emotion. Like if you have a favorite character in fighting for his life, in a story, you might feel like you're being attacked. And this character's emotions, according to the researchers, are quite literally being mapped over onto our brain. And there's something called neural coupling. This is Dr. Yuri Hassan's work. And he's a researcher at Princeton, probably a teacher too. The brain of the listener actually links up with the brain of the teller. We're building a sense of connection physically. We don't know where we begin and the story or the teller ends. We feel less lonely. Some of his research, he would record brain activity in two people. One would tell the story and one would listen. And the greater the listener's comprehension of the story, the more closely the brain wave patterns begin to mirror. And he said it's as if the brain, the teller or the brain of the teller is saying, I'm trying to make your brain similar to my brain in areas that really capture the meaning of what I'm saying, the situation, the schema, the context of the world I'm trying to tell you about. So your brains are syncing up. Your brain patterns are actually changing. So why does the brain like a good story? As social creatures, Dr. Paul Zak, who's a big oxytocin researcher, talks about this neurochemical that's key to it. And he said this chemical tells you it's safe to approach other people. It's produced whenever we are shown a kindness. It's produced when we are trusted or trusting, and it motivates cooperation. It enhances that sense of empathy. It allows us to understand how somebody might react to a given situation. And then he thought about what would happen if he could hack into this oxytocin system. And so he decided what I'll use is narrative. He did real narrative, in person, and he did video narrative. And he found that even on the video, the brain made more oxytocin when they were using narratives. And the amount that was released could predict how often people would be willing to help each other. And that's what he's finding in his research. And so stories are motivating voluntary cooperation. If a story is good, it develops tension, then attention, And it's more likely that the listener and teller will share emotion. After it ends, they're likely to continue thinking about the feelings and the behaviors in the story. They want to mimic them. Like, you ever went to a movie and like it's a big action movie and you come out like really walking, heavy and like you want to go out and work out or something. Um, so that's that drive to mimic. Now, I had some more talk about our brain here. When it's at work, we begin to make more connections between information presented and our existing knowledge. It's okay. We can integrate new information a lot easier. Research is showing that all this brain activity that can then last for several days, explaining that a really good story tends to last a longer time, something that really had an impact on us. Stories have been shown now to improve processing information. These emotions and the hormones are signaling our brain that what we're experiencing is really important. The brain will then pay more attention, and then it will store this stuff deeper into the brain. And our emotions that we're feeling heighten our ability to memorize. So our brains are storing data that makes it easier for us to retrieve later. One research person, I forgot who he was now, I didn't write it down, said we can recall facts 22 times more effectively when they are part of a story than if they're part of I just isolated data. Kristen Stewart, who is a medical professional, said that the neural changes when you hear even really read a very good story activates the left temporal lobe, and it can explain why stories are memorable. And scientists call this that that these stories are sticky, and so they stay with you. Now, the Story Collider, it's a nonprofit, Liz Neely, it's her organization used to further science and allow scientists to communicate. And she said a lot of really interesting things. There are areas of the brain that make prediction. That's the part where the imagination is. Then we can imagine what is driving the person telling the story to us. It feeds our predictions. It can help us see the situation from a different perspective. She said it even begins to shift core beliefs. And she says that when we come back out of the story into the new world, to the real world, we can have a different set of beliefs. So also they say listeners may keep thinking about story and talk to other people about it. That reinforces the memory over time and maybe drive a really broader change of attitude. Melanie Green, she works in healthcare. And she said the facts and charts that we most often use in healthcare presentations may have a purpose, but a story will wield a particularly strong influence over attitudes and behaviors. Like it can change your relationships, it can change politics, it can change the environment, she says. When you hear a message, like a doctor talking to a patient that's telling you what to do, it said it might be good advice coming from someone that you might trust, or even a friend. It's not well received. You feel backed in a corner. You feel like you want to push back. It sounds like lecturing, sermonizing. And they found that the story is more like a personal truth. And so she's putting her doctors and her scientists on stage, asking them to tell stories to better promote their goals, asking doctors to tell stories to their patients rather than telling them what to do, and let them identify with the people in the story. I think it's really interesting. They are able to get more people to give grants and donations when they use this technique because it hits them in the heart. As humanity, the stories we tell ourselves determine how we treat one another. And as long as we believe in the idea that we're not all from the same family, only part of a certain group, and then we'll act accordingly to that. The more we understand about how we're interconnected and how we have a mutual interdependence, the more we will treat ourselves and one another with a greater sense of compassion. What stories are we telling about humanity through the living of our lives? And one quote that I liked, it was Alex Krotowski. He said, stories, they are memory aids, they're instruction manuals, and they are moral compass. And back to Nurit Brenner, she's the Israeli psychologist. that does so many cool stuff. She teaches the teacher of Earth Conscious Leadership. She teaches Eco Judaism. And she's the one that's really big on the subversive nature of storytelling. But she said, tell your story, inspire others to tell their own, and trust that in the telling, new archetypes will emerge from the collective unconscious and create beautiful new thought forms that will spread around the globe. She calls storytelling a sacred place. I think I might have enough time to tell a little bit about the Human Library. This is a place where you can go and check out books who are people, right? And some of you may have heard of the Human Library before. The library is full of people that have unique and individual stories to tell, and people who you might not always come in contact with, especially if in Western culture where you in a very heterogeneous community, right? They could be people that from a different ethnicity, a drug dealer, an ex-terrorist, a single mother, a different religion, whatever. So you could go and check these books out, and you could talk to them one-on-one, or you could do it video. And it goes a little bit further than acceptance and non-discrimination, according to the researchers. They always found that people's attitudes were changed after they talked with these people. So one quote from one of their readers says, when his name was Reader Ray, when Z Zurich Foundation sent out the invitation, I was on vacation. I quickly skimmed the invite and I thought it sounded intriguing, so I clicked OK. But then remembered the time difference. I had to wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning. I set my alarm. I jumped up, set at my computer, and I don't know where the 2 hours went. They flew by. It was 3 a.m. I couldn't go back to sleep because my mind was buzzing from the impact of what I had just heard. In the next morning, I went online. I signed up to become a book. I can reach many more people with my story, and I hopefully can make a bigger impact on the world. And so I feel that humans are hardwired for story. They motivate us to act.
As you can tell by my shirt, Jim Henson has always been an inspiration to me. He told us that we are all the same and that we should live in harmony with all around us. And his vocation was to bring the world together through story. Harry Belafonte, singer and activist, was a great friend of Jim Henson's and gave the eulogy at his funeral. I want to show the clip now. Let's see.
There's time. It would have been time for you to do the whole thing too, but I will hit share screen. Let's see, share screen. And then I go to this screen, right? Come on.
Still the other way.
No, I know. I'm supposed to be picking this. Nope, I don't want to do that. Sorry. Bring this down. And now I can do this.
This is song.
No, it's not. It's the.
There is no question about Jim Henson's great artistry, the extent to which we have all been touched by it. But greater than his artistry was his humanity. And unless you have moved among the wretched of the earth, unless you have spent countless hours on the reservations of this country that house the Native Americans and the Indians who live out hopeless lives on their reservations, unless you moved among those who live in ghettos contained by segregation and deprivation, unless you have moved among vast peoples who sit on continents that are still struggling for their human rights and their dignity, unless you have sat among tribes who care for children that face an existence of hopelessness, you will never really understand Jim Henson until you've understood how he has touched the lives of those people. Many have no hope. Many mothers sit in many places holding their children, desperately understanding that they will never be educated. They will never have a chance at life as it should be. When they get a chance to see the smile on the faces of their children as they develop the appetite to learn because they're watching Sesame Street, when they have developed the appetite to love in a loveless place because they've seen how friendly the Muppets and the creatures are to one another, when they find their own humanity in the humanity of these creations, then you'll have understood the real gift of Jim Henson and his colleagues. I say this because I have moved among those people, and I have seen in these wretched places smiles break out on faces that have never been familiar with the cause of smile, and have come to life and have been touched in a profound way, because Jim Henson said, there is hope, there is joy, there is the ability to love and to care and to find greatness in difference. That is the Jim Henson that I think most of us who have had the opportunity to serve with him, and in some instances even to serve him, that is the legacy that I think we carry with us. When I first came to Jim with a song that was created from one of those wretched places, it spoke to the hopes and to the thoughts and the feelings of a mythology that I didn't know that most people would want to even hear about. It was Jim who said, let's do it. And he showed me that there was, in fact, a greater humanity than I ever understood when I worked with those faces and those people and those Muppets who challenged me on so many levels and kept me in touch with my own humanity. The song we're about to do was a gift to Jim from a peoples who come from a continent where gifts are not common. And he turned it into a celebration and sent it back as a gift from him.
Okay, how do I do this? Oh, I know. Do that, and then I have to. I'll figure it out. Nope. I don't know how to do it. So. I don't know how to get back to just in Zoom apps.
Yeah.
Well, are you all still there?
I thought this was the point we meditate.
Yeah, well, I can't find my screen anymore so that I can see any of the people or see them. I can see this thing that says post attendee Zoom. So, but you heard that whole thing, huh?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just keep talking, and I can't see you and you can't see us, but we'll see. So anyway, Zach wanted to share that because he thought not only is Harry Belafonte a good storyteller. Oh, there we are down there. Okay. There's a little meeting down there. Okay. Oh, got it. So I can stop screen share. Okay. Don't know how to do that. All right. Well, anyway, Harry Belafonte tells a good story. Jim Henson was a great storyteller. And so Zach tended to spend a lot more time on Jim Henson, but I think we're getting a little tight. Uh, Zach wants to use that song that he was talking about as the closing prayer. It was written for the Muppet Show. And what Harry Belafonte said about it is, I discovered that song in Africa. I was in a country called Guinea. I went deep into the interior of the country. And in a little village, I met with a storyteller. And that storyteller went way back in African tradition and African mythology and began to tell this story about the fire, the sun, the water, and the earth. And he pointed out that the whole of these things put together is what turns the world around, that all of us are here for a very, very short time. And in that time we're here, there really isn't any difference in any of us if we take the time to understand each other. The question is, do I know who you are, who I am? Do we care about each other? Because if we do, we can turn the world around. This song has been used in all kinds, I found out, religious services. In fact, it was the Unitarian Universalist Hymn of the Week for January 24th of this year. And it was sung by Harry Belafonte. If I can get back to that, if I can get back to my tabs, I should be able to show it. And that will be the closing prayer.
We can do stuff after.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, there we go. It's kind of long. Can you guys hear that?
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Whoa, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Whoa, so is life a batiwa. So is life. Whoa, so is life a batiwa. So is life. river wash the mountain, fire make the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain, spirit is the sunlight turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit. Only can the spirit turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit. Only can the spirit turn the world around. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See, we wonder never clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Whoa, so is life about you. So is life. Whoa, so is life about you.
Just don't talk about East.
Whoa, so is life about you. So is life. Whoa, so is life about you. So is life. Whoa, so is life about you. So is life. Whoa, so is life about you. So is life.
Zoom. Okay, can you all hear me? Okay, can you guys hear me? Nope. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, okay. I'm still not seeing the picture well. Okay, so that was the prayer.
So is life. Amen.
Amen. So that's our program. Thank you.